You see that lake behind me? Yesterday it was blue, this morning it was glowing green. The HOA thought no one would notice when they dumped their chemicals in it. But when I called the EPA, their smug smiles vanished. You're about to see how fast an HOA meeting turns into a federal investigation, and trust me, you'll want to subscribe before the next part drops. I knew something was wrong the moment I opened my window that morning. The lake behind my house, the one I'd spent years cleaning, stocking with fish, and keeping pristine, smelled like paint thinner. The air carried a chemical sting that made my eyes water. For years, that lake had been my refuge. I'd wake up early, pour a cup of coffee, and sit by the dock watching the fog roll across the surface like silk. Ducks nested in the reeds, dragonflies skimmed the water, and the reflection of my cabin shimmered like a mirror. But that morning, it looked wrong. Oily streaks floated across the surface, twisting in ugly rainbow swirls. I walked down to the dock, crouched low, and dipped my fingers into the water. The smell hit harder, sharp, industrial, like something straight from a chemical plant. My stomach turned. Across the water, I saw the source, the HOA development. They'd built their fancy new community right up against the opposite shore, concrete driveways, manicured lawns, and a private clubhouse that looked more like a country club than a neighborhood. They called it Lakeside Estates. But to me, it had always felt like a threat. When I bought my land, there was no HOA in sight. I owned 10 acres, including the natural lake that technically stretched into part of their property line, a shared boundary, but the water rights were mine. That meant anything that entered that lake was my problem legally and environmentally. And now, I could see what they'd done. Near their side of the shore, a maintenance crew in reflective vests was hosing down the concrete near the clubhouse parking lot. The runoff was flowing straight into the lake, a white, foamy mixture of cleaning solvent and oil. I shouted from across the water, waving my arms. "Hey! What are you dumping?" One of the workers looked up startled, then turned to another man, tall, clean-cut, clipboard in hand, clearly the HOA manager. He cupped his hands and yelled back, "Just cleaning the pavement. It's environmentally safe." I wasn't buying it. I grabbed my phone and started recording, zooming in on the hoses, the barrels labeled surface cleaning solution, and the murky runoff spilling straight into the water. My camera picked up the oily reflection spreading across the lake's surface, like a wound bleeding out. Within minutes, I could see the fish near my dock rising to the surface, gasping. I reached down and saw one, a large bass I'd stocked myself, floating belly up. My anger boiled. That lake wasn't just water. It was history. My dad had bought this land decades ago, back when it was wild country. He taught me to fish here, to respect nature, to keep it clean. Now, because some HOA wanted spotless driveways, they were poisoning it. I stormed inside, pulled up the number for the HOA office, and called. The woman who answered had the usual cheerful, fake tone. "Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association, this is Cheryl speaking." "Cheryl," I said, trying to stay calm, "your maintenance crew is dumping chemical runoff into the lake. Fish are dying. You need to stop it right now." There was a pause. Then a sigh. "Sir, our cleaning products are approved for use by the county. Maybe it's just natural algae or sediment. We can't be responsible for," I cut her off. "I've got video evidence. If this isn't stopped by the end of the day, I'll be sending it straight to the environmental authorities." Her tone hardened. "Sir, we'll review the situation and get back to you. Please refrain from making accusations." Then she hung up. By sunset, the hoses were still running. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the oily ripples under the moonlight, fury simmering inside me. They didn't care. Not about the water, not about the wildlife, not about the fact that this lake had been here long before their overpriced homes. That's when I made my decision. If they wanted to play games, fine. I'd play too. But I wasn't going to call the sheriff or complain on some HOA forum. No, I was going to bring in the one group they couldn't talk their way out of. The EPA. And when they showed up, Lakeside Estates would learn what real rules looked like. The next morning, I woke up to the same chemical stench drifting through the windows. But this time, I wasn't just angry, I was focused. If the HOA thought they could wash away their mess and hide behind fake smiles and board meetings, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I spent the morning documenting everything. First, I took fresh video footage from the shoreline, clear close-ups of the oily sheen across the water. Then I filmed the dying fish near my dock, the murky bubbles rising from the surface, even the ducks that were avoiding the water entirely. Then, using my drone, I captured aerial footage of the HOA's maintenance crew spraying down the parking lot again. The drone zoomed in on the barrels, the hoses, and the little stream of runoff snaking directly into the lake. When I reviewed the footage, one thing stood out: each chemical drum had a label. I paused the frame and zoomed in: Surface Pro Cleaner, industrial use only, avoid water contamination. That was my smoking gun. I uploaded every video, timestamped it, and saved them to both a hard drive and a cloud folder. I wasn't going to let anything mysteriously disappear. Then I opened my laptop and filed an official complaint with the Environmental Protection Agency. I included my footage, the coordinates of the lake, the name of the HOA, and the company name from the chemical barrels. In the complaint section, I wrote, "Illegal chemical discharge into a freshwater ecosystem by Lakeside Estates HOA maintenance team. Direct contamination observed. Immediate risk to fish, wildlife, and local water supply." When I hit submit, I didn't expect a response anytime soon. Government agencies usually move slow, like molasses. But less than an hour later, I got an automated acknowledgement: "Your case has been assigned to a regional EPA investigator. Expect follow-up contact within 72 hours. That was faster than I thought. Meanwhile, the HOA had no idea what was coming. By noon, I walked over to their side of the lake. The crew was gone, but a few HOA board members were out front near the clubhouse, laughing, sipping coffee, and pretending nothing was wrong. I approached the group. One of them, a man in his 50s with slicked back hair and a smug expression, turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning," he said. "Can we help you?" "You can start by cleaning up your mess," I said, pointing toward the lake. "Your crew's been dumping solvent directly into the water. My fish are dying, and that's a violation of state and federal law." He chuckled. "Now hold on. We've got environmental approval for all our products. You sure that's not just algae bloom? Happens every spring." I took a slow breath. "I've got drone footage, timestamps, and chemical labels that say, 'Avoid water contamination.' You sure you want to stick with that story?" That wiped the grin off his face. The others shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. Finally, a woman with a clipboard spoke up. "Sir, you can't just come here and accuse the HOA of crimes. If you continue to harass us, we'll be forced to contact our legal team." "Good," I said. "Because when the EPA calls, you'll need one." Then I turned and walked back home, leaving them stunned. That night, I got an email from the EPA investigator assigned to the case, Special Agent Rachel Morales. She wrote, "Mr. Carter, thank you for your submission. I've reviewed your evidence. I'll be visiting the site tomorrow for initial sampling and inspection. Please do not confront or warn the suspected parties further. Regards, Rachel Morales, EPA Division of Water Compliance." Tomorrow. That word hit me like a spark. By this time tomorrow, the same people who laughed in my face would be watching federal agents in hazmat suits test their lake water. I barely slept that night. The wind carried that chemical odor across the yard, making it impossible to forget. My dog wouldn't even drink from his bowl. I had to bring him bottled water. At dawn, I made coffee and waited on the porch, camera ready. Just after 8 a.m., two white SUVs with green EPA emblems rolled down the HOA's main street. Agents stepped out wearing reflective vests and gloves, carrying sampling kits and clipboards. From across the water, I could see Karen, the HOA president herself, marching out in her bright pink blazer, demanding answers. The agents ignored her and began setting up sample jars near the shore, collecting sediment and surface water. I zoomed in with my camera. Karen's smugness was gone, replaced by panic. She tried to talk to the agents, but one held up a hand, saying something that made her freeze. Then, they started taping off the area with yellow environmental tape. From my side of the lake, I couldn't help but smile. Finally, someone with real authority was holding them accountable. But what I didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. Because once the EPA got the first set of lab results, the HOA's entire operation would collapse. By the next morning, word had spread like wildfire through Lakeside Estates. The EPA had visited. Neighbors who had ignored the strange smell for weeks were suddenly whispering in driveways and checking their mailboxes like something big was about to drop. Karen, the HOA president, was nowhere to be seen. Normally, she'd be patrolling the neighborhood with her clipboard, snapping pictures of lawns that weren't regulation green enough. But today, she'd gone silent. I didn't have to wonder long why. At around 11 a.m., a silver government SUV pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Agent Rachel Morales, the EPA investigator I'd spoken with over email. She was dressed professionally but had that air of someone who didn't waste time, clipboard in one hand, testing kit in the other. "Mr. Carter," she said, flashing her badge. "That's me." She gave a nod. "We completed the initial field tests yesterday. The results are concerning." I motioned for her to come up on the porch, where we both sat. My coffee was still warm, but her words already had my adrenaline pumping. "What kind of concerning are we talking about?" I asked. She flipped open her folder. Inside were photographs of the lake, the HOA maintenance area, and several labeled containers. Then came the report printouts with red warning symbols on the corner. "The compound they've been using," she said, "contains high concentrations of benzalkonium chloride and 2-butoxyethanol, both toxic to aquatic life. We detected levels 10 times above the legal EPA discharge limit." I blinked. 10 times. She nodded gravely. "If this runoff continues, it could kill off the fish population completely within weeks and contaminate local groundwater. It's not just a neighborhood issue, it's a federal one." I leaned back, processing it. My quiet little lake had turned into a toxic pit because some HOA board thought washing their sidewalks was more important than protecting nature. "So what happens next?" I asked. Agent Morales smiled faintly, but it wasn't the friendly kind. "We're escalating. An enforcement team is coming tomorrow to issue a cease and desist order. Once that's in place, we'll pursue fines and civil penalties against the HOA and its board members personally." I couldn't help but grin. "Personally?" She nodded. "The HOA itself is a registered corporation. But the board's signatures authorize spending, and responsibility follows that. They'll have to explain why they were using industrial-grade cleaner without a discharge permit." At that moment, I realized just how deep the hole they dug for themselves was. When Agent Morales left, I immediately texted my neighbor, Mike, who lived 2 houses down and was one of the few people not hypnotized by HOA politics. "EPA's coming back tomorrow," I wrote. "Tell everyone to keep their cameras ready." By evening, the entire neighborhood buzzed with rumors. Some thought the EPA was exaggerating. Others whispered that Karen had been seen shredding papers in her garage. At sunset, I took a walk along the lake. The surface still had that ugly shimmer, reflecting streaks of gold and silver under the dying light. A lone heron stood near the reeds, hesitant to step into the water. That hit me hard. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about fixing what they'd ruined. The next morning arrived crisp and quiet, too quiet. Normally, you'd hear lawnmowers, kids, maybe someone's radio. But today, everyone was watching. At 9 a.m., sharp, 3 black SUVs rolled in, each one bearing the EPA emblem. Behind them, a county environmental response truck followed, loaded with containment gear and spill barriers. Karen was already outside, pacing near the clubhouse in a neon blazer like a stop sign no one wanted to see. When the agents got out, she rushed toward them, waving her clipboard like a flag of surrender. "This is harassment," she yelled. "We're a private association. You can't just show up and—" But Agent Morales cut her off. "Ma'am, under Title 33 of the U.S. Code, Section 1311, unauthorized discharge of pollutants into U.S. waters is a federal offense. Step aside." Karen's jaw dropped. She didn't move. Another agent handed her a paper, a thick envelope with the EPA seal stamped in blue. "Effective immediately," Morales continued, "you are ordered to cease all use of the specified cleaning agents, pending full investigation. Failure to comply will result in criminal charges." The crowd of neighbors had gathered now, phones out, recording everything. I stood by my mailbox, trying to look casual, but inside, I was savoring every second. Karen's face went from red to white as she tried to maintain her composure. We were just trying to keep the community clean," she stammered. "It's not like we knew it was illegal." Agent Morales didn't even blink. Ignorance isn't a defense, ma'am. The agents began unloading sampling gear, placing bright orange barrels and hazard tape around the drainage area. One of them even put up a temporary water contamination, "Do not enter" sign. The sight of that sign broke the illusion of control the HOA had built for years. For the first time, residents saw the truth. Their rule enforcers were nothing but reckless amateurs hiding behind official-sounding titles. I heard whispers ripple through the crowd. "Karen's finished. Did you see the EPA logo? She's in real trouble." By the time the EPA packed up to leave, Karen looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her clipboard was gone. Her hands were shaking. That night, my inbox pinged again, another email from Agent Morales. "Mr. Carter, thank you again for your cooperation. Initial enforcement has been successful. We'll be filing official charges against Lakeside Estates HOA within the next 48 hours. You may be contacted for further testimony." I read it twice, smiling. Because now it wasn't just me versus Karen. It was the United States Environmental Protection Agency versus the HOA. And for once, justice wasn't just a word, it was happening, one legal document at a time. When the EPA left, Karen thought she could still spin the story. She wasn't the type to admit defeat, not even when cornered by federal law. By the next morning, she was already sending out a special HOA bulletin to every mailbox in Lakeside Estates, printed on glossy paper like some kind of political campaign ad. The headline read, "Fake Government Visit, Neighbor Spreads Lies to Discredit HOA." My name wasn't mentioned directly, but everyone knew exactly who she meant. Under the headline, she'd written a full page of rambling nonsense about rogue environmental activists, misinterpreted data, and unauthorized tests. She even included a line that said, "No residents should communicate with outside agencies without HOA approval." That one made me laugh. Since when did homeowners need permission to talk to the government about illegal dumping? But Karen wasn't laughing when, 2 hours later, half the neighborhood gathered on my lawn. "Tom, is it true?" asked an older man named Jerry, a longtime resident. "Did they really find poison in the lake?" I nodded and handed him a printed copy of the EPA's preliminary findings, the same ones Agent Morales had shared. The official logo at the top silenced everyone. Gasps spread through the group. A woman holding her toddler said, "My kids swim there every summer." Another neighbor muttered, "I told Karen something smelled off weeks ago." And just like that, her credibility started crumbling. Karen must have seen the crowd from her window because within minutes, she marched down the street, red-faced and trembling, her ever-present clipboard clutched like a weapon. She stopped right at the edge of my driveway, heels clicking like gunshots. "Everyone back to your homes," she barked. "You're trespassing." No one moved. "Karen," I said evenly, "this is public concern now. The EPA's involved. The lake's contaminated." She glared at me. "You're lying. You set this up to embarrass me." I took out my phone and played the video of Agent Morales reading the cease and desist order the day before. The crowd went dead silent as Karen's own voice could be heard shouting, "We're a private association," followed by Morales saying, "Under Title 33, it's a federal offense." Karen froze. You could almost see the blood drain from her face. The spell was broken. Her neighbors, the people she'd bullied with citations and fines for years, began turning on her. "Karen, how could you let this happen? You told us the cleaners were eco-safe. My dog's been sick after drinking from that lake." She stammered, "We had no idea," our vendor said. I interrupted. "You authorized the purchase, didn't you? Your signature's on the invoice." That did it. The crowd erupted into angry murmurs. Karen spun on her heel and stormed off, nearly tripping over her own clipboard. But she wasn't done. That night, around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Mike, my neighbor and friend. "Tom, you might want to look outside." I stepped onto my porch, and there she was. Karen, standing in my driveway with 2 other HOA board members, shining flashlights at my mailbox like they were detectives. "What are you doing?" I called out. She spun around. "Documenting property violations. You've installed non-approved signage." I almost laughed. "You mean the sign that says private property, no dumping?" Her jaw clenched. "That sign violates neighborhood aesthetic standards." I folded my arms. Karen, I'm not in your HOA. You don't have any authority here. You live within the visible perimeter, she shouted. That means community rules still apply. Visible perimeter? She was making up new laws now. Just then, headlights swept across the street. A white county pickup rolled up, and out stepped a familiar face, Deputy Alvarez, one of my colleagues from the sheriff's department. "Evening, Tom," he said, adjusting his hat. "Got a report of trespassing?" Karen's expression shifted instantly from fury to fear. "Officer," she said quickly, "we're conducting official HOA business. He's obstructing an investigation." Alvarez chuckled. "Ma'am, HOA rules stop where private property begins. You're the ones trespassing. Step off his driveway." The look on her face was priceless, pure disbelief. "This is harassment," she snapped. "Actually," Alvarez said, "you're the one harassing him. If I have to come back out here, it'll be with a citation." Karen opened her mouth to argue but thought better of it. She gathered her papers, muttered something under her breath, and stomped off with her board members trailing behind like scolded schoolkids. Mike came jogging over, grinning. "Man, that was beautiful. You should have seen her face when she saw the deputy badge." I smiled. "She's cracking, Mike. It's only a matter of time before the board turns on her." And I was right. By the end of the week, a rumor started spreading that several HOA board members had resigned for personal reasons. The community Facebook page, usually full of Karen's smug updates, was now a war zone of comments demanding accountability. Then, 3 days later, an official letter arrived in every mailbox from the EPA's regional office. It was addressed to all residents of Lakeside Estates entitled, "Notice of Environmental Violation. Lakeside Estates HOA effective immediately. The Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association is subject to federal investigation for unauthorized chemical discharge and contamination of local waterways. All board operations are suspended pending review." When I read that line, I knew it was over. Karen's empire had finally fallen, not because I yelled louder, but because the truth was louder than any rule she could write. That night, I stood by the lake again. The EPA cleanup team had started placing floating barriers to absorb the chemicals. The water still shimmered faintly under the moonlight, but I could finally breathe easy. The neighborhood that once feared Karen's clipboard now feared her silence. And me? I'd just proven that one person, armed with facts, patience, and the law, could take down an entire corrupt HOA. It started with a single resignation email, a short panicked message sent by the HOA treasurer. Within 24 hours, it turned into a flood. By the end of the week, half the HOA board had either resigned or gone completely silent. Their Facebook page, once filled with posts about neighborhood pride and compliance reminders, turned into a battlefield of comments, screenshots, and angry residents demanding refunds for dues. Karen, meanwhile, tried to pretend everything was fine. She sent out another community update, this one printed in red ink like a stop sign: "Do not believe outside sources. HOA under temporary review, business as usual." But it was too late. The residents weren't buying it anymore. The EPA letter had landed in every mailbox like a bombshell, complete with the agency's seal and legal jargon no one could ignore. Neighbors who once feared her now wanted her gone. I remember stepping out that morning to grab my mail when I saw 3 different homeowners standing in the middle of the cul-de-sac, waving letters and ranting. "She knew," one of them shouted. "She knew and did nothing." "My backyard drains straight into that lake," yelled another. "My kids fish there." By afternoon, someone had even taped a handwritten sign to the HOA clubhouse door that said, "Resign, Karen, we deserve better." Karen responded the only way she knew how, with threats. She emailed everyone warning that unauthorized assemblies violated HOA policy and that anyone spreading defamation would face fines. Except, there was no longer an active HOA to enforce anything. The treasurer, the secretary, and the vice president had all stepped down, leaving Karen alone. The bank account was frozen by the county pending investigation. Without board approval, she had no access to HOA funds, no money for printing, maintenance, or even legal defense. And then came the real blow. 2 weeks after the EPA's visit, a thick envelope arrived for me from the county environmental office. Inside was a copy of the official enforcement action report, listing Lakeside Estates HOA as the responsible entity for illegal chemical discharge. The fine? $480,000. $500,000 in penalties, and personal liability listed for the acting board president, Karen Wilkins. I nearly dropped the papers. It was bigger than I'd imagined. That evening, I sat on my porch as Mike walked over with 2 beers. "You see the new signs?" he asked, nodding toward the clubhouse. Sure enough, there were bright orange stickers plastered across the door. "Property under federal review, do not enter." Karen's car sat parked in her driveway across the street, lights off. She hadn't been seen outside in days. "She's hiding," Mike said. "I heard the county sheriff's office served her papers this morning." I nodded slowly. "Civil liability. She's gonna lose her savings." He chuckled. "Can't say she didn't earn it." But it wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about accountability. For years, Karen had treated everyone in the neighborhood like her personal subjects. She fined people for lawn height, sent warning letters for holiday lights, and once even banned kids from riding bikes in the cul-de-sac for safety reasons. Now her reign was ending, and the very system she built was turning on her. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, I found a young woman in a business suit holding a folder. "Mr. Carter?" she asked politely. "I'm with North County Property Management. We've been appointed by the county to dissolve what remains of the Lakeside Estates HOA." I blinked. "Dissolve?" "As in, completely," she said. "Given the fines, resignations, and pending EPA case, the HOA no longer meets legal operating requirements. It's being shut down." I couldn't help but smile. "Guess the neighborhood's free again." She smiled back. "Looks that way." When word spread that the HOA was officially disbanded, it was like a festival broke out. Neighbors gathered by the lake with grills and lawn chairs, music blasting, kids laughing. For the first time in years, everyone actually seemed happy. Someone even spray-painted "No HOA, no problem" on an old signpost near the clubhouse entrance. Karen's house, however, stayed dark. Eventually, a moving truck showed up. She left quietly, head down, loading boxes while avoiding every glance. No one waved. No one said goodbye. I watched from my porch as she drove away, her pink blazer hanging in the passenger seat like a ghost of her former self. It was poetic, in a way. She'd spent years controlling people, and in the end, she couldn't even control her own downfall. A few weeks later, I got one last call from Agent Morales at the EPA. "Just wanted to let you know," she said, "the cleanup's going well. We'll restore the lake to safe conditions by next month. You did the right thing reporting it." "Glad to hear it," I said. "Karen." She paused for a moment. "Under personal review. The Department of Justice is handling that part now." I hung up, staring out at the water. The sun was setting over the lake, clearer, slowly coming back to life. Ducks had returned. Fish were visible near the surface again. Peace had returned, too. For years, Karen ruled this neighborhood through fear and fake authority. But in the end, it wasn't anger or shouting that stopped her. It was the law, patient, steady, and absolute. And as the first stars began to appear above the quiet, healing lake, I realized something simple but powerful: you don't fight corruption by matching its noise. You beat it by letting the truth speak louder. The weeks after the HOA collapse felt strange, like someone had finally lifted a weight off everyone's shoulders. For years, people had tiptoed around their own homes, afraid that a flower pot the wrong color or a parked truck on the street would get them fined. But now, Lakeside Estates felt alive again. The first thing to go was the constant fear of surveillance. The little security cameras that the HOA had installed on lampposts to monitor compliance were taken down by the county during the investigation. The moment those cameras came off, neighbors actually started smiling at each other again. Kids played on the sidewalks, laughter replaced complaints, and people began painting their mailboxes however they wanted: bright blue, red, even gold. I'd never seen this place so free. Still, freedom alone wasn't enough. The lake, our centerpiece, was still undergoing cleanup, and the community needed leadership. Not a dictator like Karen, but someone who could actually rebuild trust and guide things the right way. It started small. One morning, my neighbor Mike stopped by with a coffee in hand. "Tom," he said, "a few of us are getting together this weekend to talk about keeping the lake clean. You should come." I went, mostly out of curiosity. About 20 neighbors gathered in the park near the water's edge, folding chairs arranged in a loose circle. There was no podium, no gavel, no one demanding authority. Just regular folks who cared about their homes. An older man named Jerry stood up first. "We all know what happened," he said, glancing toward Karen's old house, now empty. "But this place doesn't have to fall apart. We can still have order, the right kind. No more abuse, no more power trips." Everyone nodded. For the first time, I saw unity instead of division. Then Jerry turned to me. "Tom, you dealt with the EPA. You know what went wrong better than anyone. You should help us organize something new, something fair." I wasn't expecting that. "I'm not looking to be in charge," I said, raising my hands. "Neither were we," Mike added with a grin, "but somebody has to lead." After a long pause, I agreed to help. Not as president, not as enforcer, just as a coordinator. Over the next month, I worked with a small group of residents to form what we called the Lakeside Stewardship Committee. It wasn't a replacement HOA, no fines, no bylaws, no power games. It was voluntary, community-run, and focused solely on restoration and improvement. Our first act was cleaning the lake's perimeter. The EPA had already removed the chemical residue, but debris still littered the shoreline. So on a sunny Saturday morning, more than 50 people showed up, families, retirees, even teenagers, armed with gloves, rakes, and trash bags. The scene was surreal. The same people who once avoided each other over silly HOA arguments were now working side by side, laughing, sweating, and sharing lemonade breaks. By noon, the lake looked cleaner than it had in years. Mike stood beside me, wiping sweat from his brow. "You realize, man," he said, "you did this. You gave everyone a reason to fight back." I shook my head. "No," Karen did. "I just gave them a reason to stop being afraid." Later that day, we held a potluck picnic by the water. Someone brought a grill, kids ran around with sparklers, and an older couple played country tunes from a portable speaker. The sunset reflected off the water like melted gold, clear and calm. For the first time, the lake didn't look poisoned, it looked alive. The following week, the county's environmental officer paid us a visit. "You folks did an impressive job here," she said, walking the shoreline with me. "The EPA rarely sees communities recover this fast." I told her the truth. It wasn't just cleanup, it was a reset. We'd all learned what happens when authority goes unchecked. A few days later, the local newspaper ran a headline that made the entire neighborhood proud. "From pollution to progress, Lakeside Estates residents restore their community after HOA scandal." It even featured a photo of our cleanup day, me, Mike, and a group of kids holding bags of trash, smiling in front of the newly restored lake. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Some of Karen's former allies had moved away, too embarrassed to face the aftermath. But the majority stayed, stronger and wiser than before. Then came something I didn't expect, a letter from the EPA's regional director. "Mr. Carter, your proactive reporting and cooperation have been instrumental in preventing long-term ecological damage. On behalf of the Environmental Protection Agency, thank you for your vigilance and commitment to public safety." They even enclosed a certificate of recognition. I didn't need it for validation, but when I showed it at our next community meeting, everyone applauded. Jerry raised a toast and said, "To Tom, the man who taught Karen that justice still exists." The laughter that followed wasn't mocking, it was healing. From then on, Lakeside Estates became something special, a neighborhood that stood on its own feet without the weight of overreach. The lawns weren't all uniform anymore, and the mailboxes didn't match, but there was beauty in the imperfection. It was real, honest, free. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat by the lake again. Ducks paddled across the calm surface, the faint sound of kids laughing in the distance. For the first time in months, the air smelled clean. Mike walked up beside me, holding 2 beers. "You ever think about what she'd say if she saw this?" I chuckled. "Probably something about unauthorized gatherings." He laughed. "Guess we'll live dangerously then." We clinked bottles, watching the reflection of the orange sky ripple on the water. Karen's reign was gone, the HOA was history, and what replaced it wasn't chaos, it was community. And as I looked out at the peaceful lake, I realized something simple: you can't force people to care about their homes with fines and threats. You make them care by giving them ownership, by reminding them it's theirs to protect. That was the real victory. It was almost 2 months after the EPA wrapped up their investigation when I first heard the name Karen again. By then, Lakeside Estates had become unrecognizable, in a good way. The lake sparkled clean, neighbors helped one another, and there hadn't been a single shouting match or citation in weeks. But peace, as I've learned, has a way of drawing out the people who hate it most. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. I was loading tools into my truck, planning to fix a section of dock, when I heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. A shiny new SUV rolled up the main road, silver, spotless, and tinted. The driver's door opened, and out stepped her. Karen. Her hair was shorter now, dyed a sharp platinum blonde, and she wore oversized sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the scowl on her face. She froze when she saw me, just for a second, before forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said, her voice clipped. "I see you've turned my neighborhood into a circus." I leaned against the truck, crossing my arms. "Your neighborhood? Karen, you sold your house." "I didn't sell it. I was forced to leave because of that ridiculous EPA witch hunt." I raised an eyebrow. "You dumped chemicals in a lake, Karen. That's not a witch hunt, that's a felony." Her smile cracked. "It wasn't me. It was the contractors. I had no idea what they were disposing of. I was just trying to make improvements." The way she said it, as if poisoning wildlife was a mild inconvenience, made my blood boil. Before I could respond, Mike came jogging over from across the street. "Oh no," he muttered, stopping beside me. "Tell me that's not who I think it is." "Afraid so." Karen folded her arms, her gaze sweeping over the houses. "I'm just here to check on how things are going. I heard the HOA's dissolved, which is unacceptable. This community needs structure, order, someone to maintain standards." Mike laughed out loud. "Yeah, we've got standards now, like not dumping toxic waste into the ecosystem." Karen glared at him. "You people have no idea what it takes to run a neighborhood. You think you can just have freedom without discipline? This place will fall apart without me." I gestured toward the lake behind us. "Funny, it's never looked better." She turned toward it, her lips curling. "Temporary. Give it a year, weeds, debris, decline. You'll see." "Or," I said, "we'll keep working together like adults and prove you wrong." Her jaw tightened. Then she took a slow step closer. "You may have gotten the EPA involved, Tom, but you can't keep me out of my own community. I'm still a member of the Lakeside Estates Historical Society, and I'll be filing a motion to reinstate the HOA charter." Mike groaned. "Here we go again." I stayed calm, though my heart pounded. "Karen, you can file whatever you want. But the county officially revoked the HOA's operating license after the EPA report. It's done. Finished." That finally got through to her. For the first time, her confident smirk faltered. "You can't do that," she whispered. "You can't erase me." "No one erased you," I said evenly. "You did that yourself." She stood there, trembling, a mix of rage and disbelief. I thought for a second she might lunge or start screaming like before. But instead, she turned on her heel and stormed back to her SUV. Just before slamming the door, she hissed, "This isn't over." The tires screeched as she sped off, disappearing down the road. Mike exhaled. "Man, she's like a storm you think is gone, then it comes back just to ruin your weekend barbecue." I laughed, but uneasily. "She won't get far. Not this time." I didn't realize how right I'd be, or how fast things would spiral again. That night, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a man's voice said, "Mr. Carter. This is Detective Alvarez from the county sheriff's office. I need to ask you a few questions about a complaint filed earlier today." My heart sank. "Complaint? From who?" He hesitated. "A Mrs. Karen Hensley. She claims you and your neighbors are illegally using HOA funds for personal gain." I nearly laughed. "There are no HOA funds, Detective. The HOA was disbanded. She doesn't have any authority here." "That's what we figured," he said, sighing. "But she filed it anyway. We'll be stopping by to verify records, just procedure." When I told Mike and Jerry, they both groaned. "She's trying to stir up legal trouble," Jerry said. Same old playbook. But this time, it didn't work. When the detective showed up the next day, I had every document ready: the county's official dissolution notice, EPA correspondence, and all the committee's public meeting minutes. The officers barely stayed 15 minutes before saying, "Looks like she's wasting everyone's time." Still, Karen wasn't done. Over the next week, she started showing up again, standing near the park, watching, muttering under her breath. Sometimes she'd take pictures of people's homes. Other times, she'd approach random neighbors, handing out flyers titled, "Rebuild the HOA, Take Back Lakeside Estates." Most folks ignored her. A few laughed. But then she made her biggest mistake yet. One afternoon, she marched straight into the community garden, the one we'd built together, and started ripping up the no dumping signs we'd put near the lake. Unfortunately for her, she didn't realize one of the new security cameras, installed by the county, not us, was pointing right at her. Within 24 hours, the police came knocking again, this time for her. When they found her at a nearby gas station, she was screaming at an officer about citizens' rights and corruption. She was arrested on charges of trespassing and vandalism, along with violating a restraining order the EPA had quietly filed to keep her away from the cleanup site. When the news hit, the entire neighborhood sighed in relief. Mike texted me later that night, "Guess she found out the hard way, you don't mess with the lake or the law." For once, I couldn't disagree. The next morning, as I stood by the water, the reflection of dawn shimmered across the lake's smooth surface. The air was calm, peaceful. I smiled to myself. Goodbye, Karen. She'd returned, tried to reclaim her throne, and lost it all again, this time for good. The morning after Karen's arrest, the air in Lakeside Estates felt different. For the first time in months, it was peaceful, but also charged with something new. Anticipation. Because while the HOA might have been dead, the county had only just begun their work. And when government agencies get involved, they don't stop halfway. I got the first call just after sunrise. "This is Deputy Commissioner Harris, County Environmental Enforcement," the voice said. "We're sending a team today to finish the environmental remediation plan on the lake. Also, we'd like your assistance, since you were the original complainant." I agreed immediately. After what Karen and her crew had done, dumping concrete wash, oil runoff, and paint solvents into the water, I wanted to see justice carried all the way through. By noon, a small convoy of white trucks rolled down the gravel road. Out stepped inspectors in reflective vests, an environmental scientist, and even a lawyer representing the county. Neighbors gathered along their porches, whispering like it was a parade. But this wasn't a celebration. It was accountability. The lead inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patel, shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Carter, your evidence was crucial to our case. Without your footage and samples, this could have dragged on for years." I nodded. "I just wanted to protect the lake." "And you did," she said. "But now, we need to make sure this never happens again." That's when she pointed to the far end of the lake, where the HOA's construction company had built their illegal drainage line. The pipe was half buried, still stained gray from residue. "We're excavating that line and sealing it," Dr. Patel explained. "Once that's done, the county will classify this lake as protected land, meaning no HOA, developer, or private owner can tamper with it without a federal permit." Mike, who had come along to help, grinned. "So basically, Karen's little playground is now government property?" "Protected public trust," Dr. Patel corrected, but her tone hinted at amusement. "Let's just say the EPA will be watching closely." That was the best news we could have hoped for. But then came the real shocker. While the county team dug through the records Karen had tried to fix, they discovered something no one expected. The HOA had been illegally collecting fees from a dozen homes that technically weren't part of the HOA jurisdiction. Those homeowners had been bullied, threatened, even fined, all without any legal basis. And Karen, of course, had signed every notice personally. Dr. Patel's assistant called it one of the most blatant cases of HOA fraud they'd seen in years. Within hours, the county attorney had everything they needed to issue civil fraud charges against the HOA's former board members, including Karen. When word spread, the neighborhood came alive. People who'd been quiet during the entire saga finally stepped forward with their own stories about fake fines, intimidation tactics, and retaliatory rule violations. One man even showed us a $1,200 bill for lawn overgrowth that he'd paid just to stop the harassment. It was all going to be part of the case now. By evening, a news van from Channel 6 parked outside the entrance. The reporter stood by the lake, announcing, "County officials today confirmed a criminal investigation into the Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association following reports of environmental contamination and financial misconduct." Behind her, the lake shimmered, restored, clear, beautiful. It was poetic. The HOA had tried to poison the water, and now the truth had washed everything clean. That night, I sat on my porch with Mike and Jerry, watching the last bit of daylight fade. "You realize," Mike said, sipping his soda, "Karen's name is going to be in the papers again, and not the way she wants." "Good," Jerry muttered. "Maybe it'll stop other Karens from thinking they run the world." I chuckled, but deep down, I knew we weren't done yet. Karen was still out there, still scheming. And someone like her doesn't fade quietly. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. "Hello." Static crackled, then a voice, faint, trembling, but unmistakable. "Tom, you think you've won. But they'll come for you next. You embarrassed the wrong people." It was Karen. "Karen, where are you?" I asked. No answer. Just breathing. Then the line went dead. Jerry looked over. "Who was that?" I hesitated. "Karen. She's not taking it well." Mike sighed. "I don't get it. She could have just apologized. Moved on. Instead, she burned her own empire down." I leaned back, staring at the stars reflected in the lake. Some people can't live without control. And when they lose it, they lose everything. The next morning, I found out Karen had made bail. And by noon, she was already trending online, her mugshot circulating with headlines like HOA president arrested in lake contamination scandal. Public opinion had turned fast. Even the state's attorney general got involved, announcing a joint task force to audit HOAs across the county for similar misconduct. The wave Karen started by being greedy had now turned into something bigger: reform. A movement. Neighbors from other communities emailed me, thanking me for standing up. Some even asked how to organize their own HOA reform committees. For the first time, I felt proud, not just for surviving the madness, but for changing something real. That night, standing at the water's edge, I whispered, "This one's for everyone who's ever been bullied by a power-hungry HOA." The lake was calm again. The stars rippled across its surface. Peace, real peace, had finally returned. But deep inside, I knew one thing: this story wasn't over. Karen wasn't done. And before the season ended, she'd find one last way to stir the storm. 3 weeks passed after Karen's arrest, and things finally began to settle. The county had cordoned off the HOA office, the EPA had declared the cleanup substantially complete, and life in Lakeside Estates was almost peaceful again. Almost. Because if there was one thing everyone in that neighborhood knew, it was that Karen never stayed quiet for long. It started with rumors. A neighbor mentioned seeing her old car, that pearl-white Lexus with the vanity plate Rules 1, parked late at night near the HOA clubhouse. Someone else said they'd heard movement inside, even though it was supposed to be sealed for investigation. I didn't want to believe it. But then one morning, I found new signs posted along the neighborhood entrance. Not the usual government notices. No, these were printed on cheap paper, taped crookedly to the signpost. "The HOA is not dissolved. Beware of imposters. Follow real leadership." Signed at the bottom in thick black marker, "Karen, President, HOA Restoration Committee." I nearly laughed out loud. But as funny as it looked, I knew how dangerous that kind of delusion could be. Karen wasn't just clinging to power, she was trying to rebuild it. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed again. "Tom, you need to see this," said Mike. I met him down by the lake where a small group had gathered: Jerry, a few other residents, and a pair of county officers. They were staring at the HOA storage shed, the one next to the old office. The padlock was broken. The door half open. Inside were stacks of old HOA records, filing boxes, and what looked like new paperwork. Freshly printed. Dr. Patel from the county had warned us, "Don't touch anything. If she's forging documents again, we'll need it as evidence." So we waited. And sure enough, within an hour, a county investigator showed up with gloves and a camera. What they found inside made everyone's jaw drop. Karen had been sneaking back at night, using fake HOA letterhead to send revival notices to residents. Letters demanding dues, threatening fines, and even declaring new emergency assessments to rebuild the community. Some people had already paid. They thought it was real. The total amount she'd collected? Over $9,000. And here's the worst part, she'd been funneling it through a fake business account under the name Lakeside Renewal Fund. It was fraud. Again. When Dr. Patel got wind of it, she immediately called the sheriff's department, my department. And this time, the irony couldn't have been more perfect. Because I was the one who got to make the arrest. That evening, I changed into my uniform, checked my gear, and drove toward the old HOA office with 2 deputies. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long golden streaks across the lake. When we arrived, Karen was there, caught red-handed, stuffing more papers into a box. Her hair was messy, sunglasses crooked, and her expression defiant. She looked up, saw me in uniform, and froze. Karen Myers. I said firmly, "You're under arrest for fraud, impersonation, and violating county injunction orders." Her clipboard dropped. You can't do this. I'm the president." "Not anymore," I said, stepping forward. "The HOA doesn't exist. The county dissolved it." She started backing away, shouting, "You're lying. This is my neighborhood. Mine." But it was over. The deputies cuffed her without resistance. She was trembling, not angry anymore, just broken. As we escorted her to the car, neighbors peeked out from their porches. Some whispered, some filmed. But no one said a word. For years, Karen had walked these same streets, barking orders and handing out fines. Now she was the one being escorted, by the law she thought she controlled. I'll never forget what she said before the door closed. "I built this place. You all turned on me." I met her eyes. "No, Karen. You destroyed it, and we rebuilt it." Then the door slammed shut, and the cruiser pulled away. The next morning, word spread like wildfire. The local paper ran the headline, "Former HOA president rearrested for fraud, caught forging dues notices." The photo showed her being led away, handcuffed, with that same clipboard in her hand. Neighbors started celebrating in quiet, symbolic ways, tearing up old HOA warning letters, repainting their fences however they wanted, or planting flowers where uniform landscaping once ruled. Jerry even hung a small wooden sign by the lake that read, "Freedom looks good on us." It did. Later that week, I attended a county hearing where Karen faced the judge again. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was mentally unwell and acting under stress. But the judge wasn't having it. "Ms. Myers," he said, "you were given every chance to walk away. Instead, you came back to commit more crimes. You've proven that power is something you can't handle responsibly." He ordered a 2-year prison sentence, probation after, and restitution to every resident she had defrauded. When she was let out, she didn't look at me, just at the floor. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. Just done. Justice had finally finished what karma started. A week later, the lake sparkled under the afternoon sun. The community gathered again, not for a meeting, not for rules, but for a celebration barbecue. Kids splashed at the shoreline. Someone played music from a speaker. Laughter echoed through the neighborhood that once lived under Karen's thumb. Mike walked over with a burger in hand. "You realize this is the happiest this place has ever been?" "Yeah," I said with a grin. "Took a chemical spill, 3 arrests, and the EPA, but we got there." He laughed, nearly choking on his bite. "So what now, Sheriff? You running for HOA president?" I shook my head. No more presidents. Just neighbors. We clinked our soda cans and watched the sunset over the water. Peaceful, golden, perfect. Karen's legacy had ended where it began, by the lake she tried to control. But Lakeside Estates had finally taken it back. This time, for good. It's been 6 months since the last time anyone heard the name Karen Myers spoken out loud in Lakeside Estates. And honestly, it's been 6 of the most peaceful, fulfilling months this community has ever known. The lake that once glimmered under a chemical sheen now reflects the clear blue sky like glass. Ducks returned. Fish thrived. Even the cattails at the edges started growing tall again. The EPA finished their final inspection in early spring and officially declared the site ecologically restored. The county held a small ceremony by the shoreline. A few of us, myself, Mike, Jerry, and Dr. Patel, stood together as the environmental commissioner unveiled a bronze sign that read, "Lakeside Preserve Protected Natural Waters," in honor of the residents who fought for justice that one hit hard. I didn't need an award or recognition, but seeing those words, "fought for justice," made all the long nights, the evidence collecting, the tension, worth it. Karen's empire was gone. Completely. Her house had been foreclosed. The county auctioned off what remained of the HOA property to repay restitution to the residents she'd wronged. Every penny collected went right back to the people. And the funniest part? The old HOA clubhouse is now a community library and nature center. The same place Karen once used to issue fines is now filled with books, maps, and kids' drawings of fish and ducks. Mike volunteers there on weekends, teaching local kids how to fish responsibly. Jerry runs a community watch, not the kind that spies, but one that looks out for each other. As for me, I still live in the same house by the lake, same gravel driveway, same porch swing. But life feels different now. Better. I've been offered promotions at the department, even interviews about the HOA incident, but I keep turning them down. That whole experience taught me something bigger than any badge could. Real authority isn't about enforcing, it's about protecting. And Lakeside Estates had finally learned that too. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the trees. A cool breeze moved through the air, carrying the smell of freshly cut grass and barbecue smoke from down the street. The neighborhood was alive. Kids rode bikes past my yard, people waved as they walked their dogs, and laughter echoed across the water. Freedom had a sound, and this was it. Mike came over, as he always did, with 2 beers and a grin. "You know," he said, sitting down beside me, "every time I walk by that new sign, I think about how close we were to losing all this." "Yeah," I said, taking a sip. "All it took was one woman with too much power and not enough sense." He chuckled. "And one sheriff with a spine." I laughed. "Don't start. I didn't do it alone. You, Jerry, Dr. Patel, the whole neighborhood stood up." "Maybe," he said, "but you were the one who started the fight." We watched as the last orange streaks of daylight faded. Across the lake, lights flickered on in every home, warm, inviting, peaceful. The sound of frogs began to hum from the reeds, the kind of sound you only notice when life finally slows down enough to listen. Later that night, I took a walk to the water's edge. The moon was high, its reflection rippling across the calm surface. I could still remember the first night I saw that lake, poisoned, lifeless, silent. Now it was alive again. Behind me, someone approached quietly. It was Jerry. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Just thinking," I said. "Feels like the lake's finally ours again." He nodded slowly. "You know, I heard from the county today. They're naming you honorary steward of the preserve." I raised an eyebrow. "Steward? That sounds suspiciously like president." Jerry laughed. "No meetings. No fines. Just a fancy title and a lifetime fishing pass." "Now that," I said, "I can live with." We both stood there in silence for a while, listening to the gentle splash of water. A few weeks later, a letter came in the mail, no return address, just my name written in sharp, familiar handwriting. For a second, I hesitated. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Tom, you were right. I couldn't let go. I thought power made me important. But watching everything fall apart taught me the truth. I'm starting over somewhere new. Maybe next time, I'll just be a neighbor." Karen, no threats. No anger. Just an ending. I folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't. But for me, it didn't matter anymore. Because Lakeside didn't need an HOA, or a president, or anyone pretending to run it. It just needed people who cared. On the anniversary of the cleanup, we held a Freedom by the Lake festival, a small celebration of how far we'd come. Kids raced boats made from soda bottles. Neighbors grilled burgers. Someone even set off fireworks that reflected perfectly on the water. And right as the finale burst across the sky, I looked around at the crowd, families, laughter, friendship, and I realized what we'd built wasn't just a community. It was resilience. The kind that survives even after being poisoned, fined, and nearly destroyed. When the last spark faded, the crowd cheered. Mike raised his drink and shouted, To freedom. Everyone joined in. To freedom. I looked out over the lake, calm, beautiful, alive, and smiled. We didn't just take back our neighborhood. We took back our peace. And that was something no HOA, no Karen, no rulebook could ever touch again.